The Retroid Pocket Mini has arrived, and when I started to set it up, I was becoming very self-aware that I've done this many times now with different handhelds, made many videos, and going into the Mini, I was really wondering what I would have to say about it. As I'm writing this introduction, I have the Mini playing the intro of Lufia 2 for the Super Nintendo, and I'm glancing over looking at the beautiful pixels that really pop on that bezel-less 4x3 AMOLED screen, listening to the clear audio quality of the front-facing speakers, and seeing the sleek glass plate of the front and its charming size, which isn't even that much smaller than the Retroid Pocket 4, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I do have something to say about this. It's a gorgeous little handheld that inspires me to delve into retro gaming and spend time reliving some good old memories and make some new ones. I'm going to start off just listing the things I really like about this, and then I'll start picking into what I'm not a big fan of. It's a pretty balanced handheld experience that I think works if you go into it with the right frame of mind. First of all, I think it's a really good looking device. In person, it just hits your eyes a little more, and I'll be one of those people to say, I don't think the size of the screen is a problem. I know people would have liked a 4-inch screen, but it wasn't meant to be. Maybe it just feels like it works more on the black device without the bezels, as you just don't notice any edges. So I'm really happy I got the black model. It almost feels like something Aya would make, so it is a little jarring to see an open screw design this way, as Aya pride themselves on not showing any screws, but that's just a minor nitpick. The screen is absolutely gorgeous and really pops at its highest brightness, and it gets super dim at its lowest. Personally, I'm just going to leave it as bright as possible to really get the most out of this screen, which is something I don't usually do, but it's really working for me because of the size of this screen. I think the device feels really nice too. It has a premium smooth feel to it, and one of the reasons I'm not using a screen protector is because I think it just makes the device look uglier. So I'm going to take that risk because I'm a fashion souls at heart and I want to look good when I go into battle. Some of you may not know I did not like the texture of the Retroid Pocket 4. I know I'm in the minority, but it was something that put me off using it. So I'm extremely happy to be holding a Retroid again that feels smooth and high quality. I'm also pretty satisfied with the performance of the device. There's been a lot of concerns about this and the Retroid Pocket 5 being only minor upgrades in terms of power with using the Snapdragon 865. But it makes more sense here with the Mini because of the 4x3 screen. Seeing Gamecube and PS2 upscaled and running smoothly in this form factor is really impressive. It's pretty much the peak of what this device is doing at its best in terms of emulation. And I don't think there is another device that gives this feeling. It almost feels like you're playing something from the past, but of very high quality, and I mean that as a compliment. The front-facing speakers are also pretty decent quality for the size of this device, and they can get pretty loud if you need them to. I was worried they might be too tinny or ear-piercing, but I'm very pleased with the frequencies. The analog sticks are also good. Not a lot to say here, as we've seen them before with the likes of the 4 and the Odin 2. You can pop the top off if necessary, and they have decent travel to them. Much better than the Switch sticks and the similar small ones used in Aya's products. I'm actually curious about modified sticks for this device that are shorter. I think they could work really well. When it comes to the buttons, this is where things are a little mixed for me. So I'm loving the D-pad. It feels really responsive, and it's nice having a device with the D-pad on top again. It just makes this device feel great as a retro machine. And something I've enjoyed doing is making a controller profile to swap the D-pad and sticks around, so I can enjoy games on the Gamecube and PS2 that don't really need analog movement, which has been really fun. The face buttons, however, are going to be hit and miss for some. I think all the system buttons feel great as they're short and clicky, but the face buttons are fairly clacky. I wouldn't say they are especially tall, but there's something about the press and the travel that makes a clear, hollow sound. It's a nice stress reliever to just run your fingers over them, but for extended use I can see how these would start to grate on someone. The shoulder buttons are a little clicky too. I personally don't mind them as much, but it's a similar situation. What I do have a problem with though are actually the triggers. They are decent triggers, and I think the design has mostly been to address the problems with the 4's triggers failing on people. But for me, they feel like they have too much resistance to them for a device this small. And they're the type of triggers you have to press directly in the middle to use properly. You can't really pull down on the sides or the edges, which is really helpful if you're playing a game that requires both sticks. So if you have to play a game like that, I think the experience will be a little uncomfortable. Another teeny problem is the SD card slot, as when you insert an SD card and shut the cover, it doesn't fully close back down smoothly. That's a huge nitpick though, and not something I'm worried about, but something I wanted to bring attention to, as it doesn't just lay completely flat against the device. So, while this device is capable of playing a bunch of decent Android titles, it's not going to be the focus of this video. What I want to show first is that I was curious about how front ends would look on this device, and I was really pleased with the results of both Retroid's own launcher and with Pegasus. The Retroid launcher looks a lot like a Switch and gives you some nice options to set up emulators and scrape artwork. If you had to do everything just from the device, I think finding all the missing art would be a little time consuming, but it looks like a front end that'll get the job done. With Pegasus, I knew the 4x3 screen might make some themes not look as good as they usually do, but again I was pleasantly surprised here, and there's a lot of themes you can download for Pegasus. When I first got into the front end, I was using a tutorial someone made for the Retroid Pocket 2, so I was aware that there were some themes made specifically for small devices, and some of these themes are becoming my favorites for this device compared to what I usually use. I know I get some comments that would love me to make a Pegasus guide. It would be a pretty in-depth video if I were ever to do it because of its scraping and metadata mostly, and figuring out how to make some emulators run, as between different devices, not all of the launch commands work the same. But if I were to have a huge chunk of time to produce such a video, I'd consider it, as after all this time, it's still the launcher I set up for all my handhelds. Now, with the performance of the device, it's something that will be able to play the majority of Gamecube and PlayStation 2 titles. I remember saying in a video this year that we were in an era where most of the new handhelds can emulate nearly everything you throw at them besides Nintendo Switch. But with the Mini and the Retroid Pocket 5, we were a little bit into the days of tweaking settings to make sure everything works perfectly. We can pretty much play a lot of titles at 2x resolution, or one that's close to a 960p resolution of the screen. And the obvious solution to some titles is to just lower the resolution, but some titles might need a small underclock or have a couple of settings tweaked. What I want to get out of the way at this point is a few of the systems that I don't think suit the Retroid Pocket Mini. Although these systems are playable, the fact that they were meant to be played on wider screens means that they won't fit the Mini's screen properly without stretching the image. Some of these games, such as Outrun on the PSP, don't actually look that bad when stretched. But a lot of these games without stretching are going to look quite small, and I wouldn't recommend people buy the Mini to play these systems. And with Nintendo Switch in particular, because the device is currently on Android 10, we're having to use a fork of Yuzu that specifically works for Android 10. Ideally, we would want to use the promised Android 13 to come, with one of the newest builds of Yuzu or Sudachi. So it could be a lot better, but as it stands, it can do some light to moderate Switch titles. The star of the show are the 4x3 games, and it's immediately noticeable with retro titles how good looking the screen is. What I wanted to get into is who this device is for, because for $199 you're getting a pocketable device that is extremely good for retro titles and can play Gamecube and PS2. But for $20 more, you can get the upcoming Retroid Pocket 5 that has a larger screen and more RAM. Although it's slightly less pocketable, why wouldn't you get that instead? And I think the best way to describe it is that the Mini knows what it is. It's meant to be a small and focused experience, and because of that, it shines in these moments. I think if you're the type of consumer who loves a handheld being like a Game Boy Advance or Mayu Mini, this is the premium version of that, where if you're willing to spend $199 for a top-end compact retro gaming handheld, you're getting one of the best of this style. Ioneo's Pocket Micro is similar in that regard, but it's a less ergonomic boxy design with worse sticks that poke out, shoulder buttons that aren't stacked, and doesn't have the OLED screen. Although its wider screen does fit better for systems like GBA, PSP, and Switch, I know which of the two I'd prefer, but the Micro is an example of the alternative at this price point. I think it's worth having an extended look at Gamecube, Wii and PlayStation 2 on the Mini. I recorded a bunch of different games and I recorded for about 2 hours. And over those 2 hours, my battery went from 100% to about 60%. So you could see that you could maybe get about 4 hours playing these kind of games, although I was switching back and forth between them. But I just wanted to mention my playtime there and what I saw the battery life was like, so you have an idea of how long that battery is going to last. So we're going to start off with F-Zero GX, and what we're going to do is go into the individual settings, go to Config General, and you'll see that dual core, it's off by default for this game, even if you have it on in the settings, which is really strange. I haven't done a lot of testing with Dolphin. A lot of these settings are pretty much like standard. I'll say if I've done something different. Here I've turned dual core on, and this is one of the tracks that is actually one of the hardest to run, I believe. And I was pretty much getting stable 60 frames per second playing it, so it was running really nice. And the colors of this stage look gorgeous on this handheld. I think something I've not really stated is that when recording this video, it's really hard to capture the colors. So in this section, I've really tried to capture the brightness and really get a feel of the warmth of the screen. And it's really nice with a lot of these games. So yeah, check them out. With Metroid Prime here, we can see that once we're attacking these flying space pirates and they crash, we're actually getting a dip in speed, and I figure what I'd try is override emulated CPU clock speed and just lower it down to about like 60% or something. With the Odin Pro and the Retroid Pocket 3, I remember reducing speeds to about 70%, and with some games it actually helped. Underclocking sometimes gives you a better speed. Attacking this enemy seemed to be a little better. There's definitely room for improvement. We can play with settings, but this was one of the first things I thought I'd try before actually lowering the resolution, because it'd be nice to keep that resolution up. with Super Mario Sunshine, I actually applied a 60 FPS gecko code to this game, and at higher frame rate it just looks really cool on this screen. And the last time I actually played this on an OLED was on the Ioneo Pocket Air, and I just remember being like really taken back by how good it looked on the screen. And it's the same thing here, it looks really great on the screen. There are times when it's struggling to keep that 60 frames, so there's definitely room for improvement. We can play with clock speed, maybe some other hack settings there. Ideally not lower the resolution. We only have like the difference between 1 and 2x. At 2x it looks great on this screen. But yeah, the 60 FPS patch works, and it's really beautiful when it's running very, very smooth. I also wanted to show some footage of Rogue Leader, as I've seen a couple of videos where it showed some footage of the Death Star and saying that it will play and it will work. This is a really tough game to run, and on different handhelds I've played this, especially when you get to the Battle of Hoth, things happen. Either you can see there's texture issues here, or it's just going to run really slow. And even on the Odin 2 I found it really difficult to play this game. So it's not so much that there isn't enough power to play this game, it's more a fault that the emulator just can't do this game very well, and it's the same with the sequel as well. So you can see that it's actually running fairly smoothly, it's just there's a texture problem. So there's probably some settings we can run here, but even when I played this on the Odin 2, there's a mission, it's like 2 missions after this one or something, and it gets to a point where it'll just crash every time, and I just could not think of a solution to figure it out. So I would say be wary with this game. You can probably find some ways to make it look better, play better, but it's a tough game to run. Yeah. Yeah. Moving on to Wii now with Mario Kart Wii. Something I haven't shown in the video actually is when you start this game, when you're going through the menus to get to the races, they're actually really choppy and bad, and they feel like a bad indicator that the game won't run. But once you are in game, it runs very, very well. So there's probably some settings and things you could do to make sure that those menus are actually a lot smoother, but they're not stopping you from playing the game properly. So another thing I haven't actually mentioned is you could use a different fork of Dolphin. I sideloaded mine from the Dolphin website, but you could use MMJR or even MMJR2. MMJR is technically the more performant one that will run certain games a lot better. MMJR2 is performant but more stable, I think. There are actually several versions of MMJR, even ones that are specifically for weaker handhelds that do lower resolutions than 1 times, so you can do 0.5 times. But for the most part, Wii is actually running excellently on here with the latest Dolphin build, so yeah, it's really nice. On to PlayStation 2 now. It's hard to resist starting off with Burnout. I think Burnout 3 is one of the first PlayStation 2 games I was so looking forward to playing on the handheld, and it feels kind of crazy to think back with the Odin Pro now that was like one of the first Android handhelds to go, oh my god, I can play PlayStation 2. But PlayStation 2, this is Never SX2, so this isn't the newest build. This is actually a build I've had for quite a long time, so well over a year. I've not actually updated the Never SX2 build I have for a really long time, so there's probably some differences in performance or other things it actually has, but everything is running great at 2x that I've tried so far, apart from a couple of games, and I'll get into that later. 2x, not really any other changes. It's all running out of the box and running really smooth and looking great too. With Gran Turismo 4, I wanted to show this one off as well because it's a difficult one to run, and this track in particular, I remember someone on a previous video on a different device, they asked me if I could test this track in particular because apparently it was the hardest to run. So what I've done here is I have hardware download mode on with disabled readbacks, and that seemed to be enough. It's really hard trying to remember all the things we used to change and tweak. I, for example, did one really long video on the Odin Pro of all the settings I'd tweak to get those games running, and that was on a much older build of A4SX2. So the newer builds are actually a lot more efficient in playing some of these games, but there's definitely like a few settings you can change to try and get some of these games running a lot better. But this entire track, I drove through it and it was 100% speed the whole way, which is really good. So that should be an indicator that the entirety of Gran Turismo 4 is playable. Mandatory Metal Gear Solid section here. Now, there's this particular bit in the hold I like to test. As you come down this ladder, usually you get a drop in speed depending on the handheld. The Odin 2 handles it quite well. This is at 2x, and I haven't actually changed any settings with this game. It's just 2x like everything else, and this is pretty much the only slowdown apart from like really kicking the crap out of these guys and they all tumble around. But I wanted to record that and show that there is a bit of slowdown, there's some stuff you can do, but all my other Metal Gear Solid footage is actually really smooth.
Nothing else matters to me. Whoever you are, you're not stopping us.
One thing I like to point out with Metal Gear Solid 3 is I like to cause some chaos in this area, and I like to get on this rooftop and make sure that they know I'm on this rooftop because they start throwing grenades, and they'll have a few of them blow up at the same time, just like that. And you can see there's some slowdown. It's actually a good way of like testing your settings to see how well you get in Metal Gear Solid 3 to run. I remember specifically just running around this rooftop and doing things to make sure that the settings I had were making the game run a lot smoother. But a lot of that Metal Gear Solid 3 footage was perfect without any tweaks.
That's what I'm talking about. Now go serve those burgers right now. All right. I'm off to a good start.
With Shadow of the Colossus, I like to test this area just before the 4th Colossus, I think it is, as when you ride up and you see this like little vista as you come down the side here, there, depending on the handheld, there is usually a big drop in quality. speed goes down and it's not great. Here, running fantastically, although there is a moment here when the Colossus starts stamping his like feet and all these effects happen and it's a lot of slowdown. So what I do is I drop the resolution from 2 to 1.5. That seemed to be the sweet spot where he was stamping his feet and it actually wasn't causing any more slowdown. So that actually really surprised me without doing any other weird tweaks. Just lowering the resolution a little bit seemed to be the right thing to do, and it was running really well after that. Now, with Zone of the Enders 2, this was a weird one. I was thinking this was going to be a really difficult one to run. So I've seen some other footage of this where this was running fine. This is just 2x Vulcan, haven't changed anything with the settings. And the area before the first boss in the game is just running really smooth. Really fun to play as well. But once you go to the first boss, what happens is there's this effect that's being used. And I don't know if it's like part of the engine or PS2 hardware, but it starts to cause slowdowns. So I actually had to change the resolution from 2 to 1.5, and then when I was fighting the boss it was actually a lot smoother. There is actually another setting, it's like a manual fix. I can't remember which one it was, and I was looking through like all my older videos to find out which video I did this in, but there's one setting in particular which turns off whatever's going on with the effects of this boss and makes it really smooth. It's similar to the videos I did where I used like a PNAC code to help with performance of some games. But yeah, at 1.5x, there's only the Enders 2 at this point where I usually find the performance dips. It's actually now running really good. That has been the Retroid Pocket Mini. It's a nice window into what to expect from the Retroid Pocket 5 as well, as they both have the same 865 Snapdragon processor and both are OLED. So if you like what you've seen, but would prefer a larger 16:9 screen and bigger battery with a little more RAM, then you'll probably want to choose that over this. Personally, I'd say the Mini has charmed me. I feel like this is going to be the pocket-sized handheld I use going forward. The way I see it is if you love some of the cheaper, smaller handhelds like the My Mini, but you're happy to pay $199 for a beautiful screen and the power to play PS2 and Gamecube on the go, then that's who this system belongs to. If you want what the Mini is but don't want it to be mini, then for $20 more you have the upcoming Retroid Pocket 5 as an option. I feel like if you're willing to spend a lot on a handheld, then it is probably worth saving for something like the Odin 2 or Odin 2 Mini, but having played the Retroid Pocket Mini now, I get the appeal. It looks fantastic and the OLED screen is just better in person. So what did you think of the Retroid Pocket Mini? I'll be reviewing the Retroid Pocket 5, which supposedly ships at the end of this month, but I assume I won't have mine until early November at the earliest. With it supposedly shipping with Android 13, we should be able to check out some Wii U and a bunch more Switch titles, so that'll be a good angle for that video. If you like this video, please give it a like, subscribe, hit the bell notification for more videos, and I'll see you for the next one. Cheers.